the 13th of May, 1943, near Matour, Tunisia. The sun burns low over the ridgelines as Obergefreiter Karl Voss presses his cheek to the warm receiver of an MG-34, the metal slick with sweat and dust. The last trucks of the Afrika Korps have already rattled east, tires carving the hardpan like claw marks. In the shallow wadi where his squad has folded into the earth, the air is thick with cordite and diesel. A distant 105 booms American, followed by the chattering rise and fall of Browning 30 caliber guns. The line is collapsing, and everyone knows it. "Munition, Karl," shouts Feldwebel Richter, voice rasped to parchment. He has a scarf knotted over his mouth to keep the sand from clawing his lungs. Karl slaps a fresh belt into the feed tray, thumbs the cover closed, and fires in short bursts at figures darting between thorn scrub. A steel helmet flashes, a hand waves forward, then the MG coughs empty. Somewhere behind them, a Panzer III wheezes its last gasps, turret cocked like a broken tooth. The order comes not as a bark, but as a fatigue. "Zurückziehen." Pull back. They run. The retreat is a tremor across the landscape, mess tins clanging, boots slipping on shale, a field radio whacking against someone's kidney at each panic stride. When they spill into the ravine where the company has been told to rally, there's only a white rag tied to a broken shovel and a lieutenant with dust rimmed in his eyelashes. He looks like a child masquerading in his father's tunic. He lifts the rag high. By dusk, the Americans have them. M1 Garand's held steady at the shoulder, bayonets not quite gleaming, their weariness masked by practiced gestures. "Hands high, no funny business," says a sergeant whose name tape reads Caldwell. The accent is flat, Midwestern. He moves briskly, checking for grenades, pausing when he turns out a pocket to find a crumbly photograph of a girl in plates. He tucks it back, nods once. "You'll get fed," he says, as if that is a promise and a policy all at once. The march to the collecting point is longer than the map suggests and shorter than despair fears. The POW column, hundreds swelling to thousands passes, wrecked lorries, drooling oil, palm fronds jittering in the rotor wash of a circling observation plane, and a field kitchen where someone ladles a thin stew into helmet bowls. Karl eats standing, the spoon clacking like a metronome on tin. The stew tastes of cumin and memory. That night, the prisoners lie shoulder to shoulder behind a ring of concertina wire, watched by silhouettes in sandbag nests. The American guards talk softly, a man's laugh cracking in the cool. A harmonica begins to thread notes into the dark. Karl's last thought before sleep is not of home or defeat or medals packed in greaseproof. It is of the strange civility in the way the sergeant returned his photograph. Within a week, they are hustled down a pier at Bizerte and into the steel belly of a Liberty ship. The hold smells of canvas, rope, and human worry. An MP with a Thompson slung low counts heads. The click of his hand tally a mechanical heartbeat. Karl finds a berth near a riveted wall that trembles with the engine's pulse. Above, the ocean hammers its flat palm against the hull. They cross under gray skies that give way to blue. Convoy ships bob on the horizon like metal gulls. Escorts knife the swells, depth charge racks bristling at their sterns. On the second night, somewhere past Gibraltar, the siren ululates. "Subcontact," someone yells. Boots beat overhead. The hold tightens around its own breath. The ship swerves hard, cargo groans, men tumble. Then the distant thump of charges, a drum roll rising from the sea's depth. Minutes pass. Hours? The siren bleeds away. A sailor peels back the hatch and shouts down, almost cheerfully, "All right, fellas. False alarm, or the fish missed." The hatch clangs shut. The darkness exhales. Days acquire the rhythm of survival. The prisoners clean the hold, scrub the decks under watch, queue for chow coffee that tastes like burnt pennies, bread that tastes like nothing at all, stew that tastes like relief. Karl learns the English words that matter: water, doctor, please. He hears new ones: Geneva, convention, spoken like talismans. He does not yet understand their power. When the Statue of Liberty finally rises from the haze, the hold erupts into noise that is not quite awe and not quite fear. New York hammers the senses even from a distance. Black stacks heaving smoke, tugs baseball batting the ship into her berth, gulls slicing the air with razored wings. On the pier, MPs in khaki and steel pots array like chessmen. A band on shore unbelievably plays something jaunty and brassy. They brought a band, someone says, disbelief curling into a smile. For us, processing is a machine of forms and rubber stamps. At a fenced yard, the prisoners shuffle through stations, medical checks where a captain in a white coat taps kneecaps and says, "Open," before a tongue depressor, inoculations that pop like knuckle cracks, a table where a corporal records name, rank, and unit in a tidy hand. Voss, Karl, Obergefreiter, 361. Infantry, Karl recites. The corporal pronounces it back, surprisingly close. "Welcome to the United States, Voss," he says without flourish. "You'll be going inland. Railcars take them west. The journey is a panorama that slides like a film reel. Brick towns with water towers, fields like green grammar stretched to the horizon, a diner where women in white paper hats carry pies to soldiers in booths, children waving at the train as if war were a parade. At night, in the brittle quiet between wheels on tracks, someone hums a hymn. The guard at the end of the car lean, with a stitched name tape that reads, Ramirez shares a cigarette through the bars of their compartment, offers a match, then says in halting German, "No smoking after lights out." He grins. Regeln rules. The word settles like a blanket. Camp appears as geometry. Double rows of wire. Watchtowers capped with floodlights. Barracks numbered in a stenciled font that looks decisive. The signboard reads simply, Camp Algona. A wind carries the smell of fresh-cut lumber and boiling laundry. The gate swings, a whistle blows 2 notes. Not harsh, just organizing. Inside, everything is unexpected. The barracks are clean, the bunks sturdy, the mattresses stuffed and stitched. A notice board lists meal times and work details. A chalkboard in a corner classroom offers an English word of the day, library. Karl mouths it. Library. At the canteen, a PX. The guard calls it the prisoners learn their camp script will buy cigarettes, stationery, and on Wednesdays, the chalked sign declares, ice cream, vanilla, or strawberry. Karl studies the chalk letters as if they conceal a trick. Ice cream? For prisoners of war? The propaganda reels he watched in Tunis had shown Americans as wolves, brutal, hungry, mechanical. Yet, the PX door chimes with a bell. Somewhere across the yard, a ball cracks against wood. A cheer bursts from a cluster of uniforms, German and American alike, wrists tucked inside sleeves against the breeze. The sound is not hostile. It is happily competitive, almost ordinary. He feels the ground tilt, as if the ship had turned again. The world seems to be writing itself with a stranger grammar than the one he was taught. Voss, calls Richter, stepping out of the barracks with a ledger. Work details posted. Also, he squints at a new sign under the clock. There is a baseball match at 1600. What is that? Karl looks at the diamond chalked on the dirt, at the bat leaning against a bench like a question. He doesn't know yet. But the day after tomorrow is Wednesday, and the word on the PX board will not leave his head. Ice cream, the 21st of June, 1943. Camp Algona, Iowa. The whistle shrills at 0600, ricocheting through pine rafters and overstacked footlockers painted with block letters PW. The barracks shiver to life, mattresses creak, boots thump the plank floor, the iron stove ticks as it cools from the night fire. Obergefreiter Karl Voss swings down from the top bunk and feels the boards bite his bare feet. He moves with the cautious economy of a soldier who expects orders to hurt. But when the door bangs open, it's not a whip of command. It's a corporal with a clipboard and a coffee mug that says Iowa, the steam winding under his nose like a small flag. Roll call, the corporal says. Then chow, move smart, fellas. The vowels are long, the tone even. He gestures with his pencil toward the posted schedule guard mount, work details, library hours, and under it a chalk scrawl in a more playful hand. Baseball 1600. Guards versus PW all-comers. In the mess hall, tin plates slide down the line like parts in a factory. Eggs, oatmeal, toast, real butter. The cooks work behind a low counter flanked by sacks of flour and a battered icebox. A Red Cross poster on the wall reminds, in English and German, that every man is responsible for humane treatment. A lieutenant in the corner military police brassard snug on his sleeve reads aloud from a leaflet about the Geneva Convention. Section 3, labor, pay, mail, recreation. The words are dull until their meaning begins to breathe. Pay 80 cents in canteen script for a day's non-hazardous work. Mail 2 postcards a week and letters as permitted. Recreation. Opportunities for sports and intellectual pursuits. Carl spreads jam on toast and stares at the purple gleam like it's contraband. "Sie meinen es ernst," Richter mutters beside him. They mean it. He sounds more wary than relieved. The work truck rattles out of the gate at 0700, a GMC CCKW with the canvas top rolled back and a powder of gravel dust stippling faces and sleeves. The road spools through a quilt of fields, corn just shoulder high, soybeans like neat writing in the earth. They pass a grain elevator with the words Algona Co-op laddered up its side, and a water tower that could almost be a watchtower if you squinted wrong. In the bed of the truck, an Iowa farmhand with hands like cedar knots rides along to "show you boys the ropes," he says, and he says it in German, learned from a grandfather who never quite shed Silesia. It is not flawless, but it is kind. They harvest beans, then hoe weeds, the monotonous work hammering a rhythm into their arms and backs. At mid-morning, the farm wife brings out coffee in a blue enamel pot and a plate of sugar cookies. She sets them down on a picnic table under an oak and hesitates, as if this is the moment she is supposed to be afraid. She is not. "Help yourselves," she says. Plenty more. The MP guard Ramirez again. Garand at shoulder arms, bayonet scabbard polished to a mirror, leans his rifle against the table and takes a cookie too. For a fragile minute, they look like any crew at any field edge in any country that grows things. A Red Cross sedan pulls up, dust draped at noon. The delegate, a Swiss man in a straw boater and linen suit too clean for the farm, checks ledgers, holds a pocket watch like an umpire's plate counter, and asks the POWs quietly if they receive mail. "Not yet," Carl says. The man notes it in a tidy hand, promises the wheels will turn. They do. Back in camp, the PX bell gives a delicate ding as the door opens. "One script, vanilla?" the clerk asks, tapping a painted price board. The freezer hum is the strangest music Carl has ever heard. He cradles the paper cup like a religious object. The first spoonful is cold enough to sting the teeth, sweet enough to empty the mind. Around him, men are smiling with their eyes closed, tough mouths gone boyish, wolfed by a memory of childhood summers that cross borders without a passport. In a corner, a guard and a prisoner argue amiably about the correct English word for Eistut. "Cone," the guard says, and pantomimes a triangle. At 1300, the library opens. A low building with windows propped on sticks and the smell of books like warm dust and linen. A sign reads, "Donated by the American Friends Service Committee." Shelves hold Mark Twain's River and Steinbeck's Fields, Goethe side by side with Churchill. There is a German-English dictionary with its spine repaired in tape, and a pile of typed lesson plans titled Camp Education Project English Conversation Elementary. The camp chaplain, Captain Howard, collar tucked under his khaki hands, out pencils stubbed from use, and says, "Start with the verbs, they do the work." By 1600, the diamond is powdered chalk, the outfield mowed close by a tractor that still smells of cut grass. A bat lies on the bench, a Louisville slugger with grain like fingerprint whorls. Ramirez strides to the plate, spits without malice, and taps the bat's end on the chalk as if waking a sleeping animal. "All right," he grins at the knot of Germans tugging at borrowed gloves. "Rules are simple. 3 strikes, you're out. 4 balls, you walk. You hit it, you run." He points with the bat. "First, second, third, home." Don't worry about the infield fly rule. Nobody understands that one. Even the guards laugh. Carl's first swing is hopeless, a full windmill that turns him almost all the way around. The ball pops the catcher's mitt with a sound like a slapped book. The second swing isn't much better. The third is different. A stinging thud, a jolt through the wrists, and the ball does not disappear into a glove, but sails, almost dazed, above second base. Men shout in 2 languages, the words are different, but encouragement sounds the same. He runs in a clumsy arc, feet slapping dirt, and loses his cap between first and second. He is tagged out by a boyish GI who can't stop grinning. "You got good wood on it," the GI says. then adds, slow and careful, gut, holes. After the inning, they sit on the bench with canteens, passing a bottle of orange soda contraband and unconcerning. A guard tunes a radio on the scorer's table. Glenn Miller leaks out in a watery trumpet that blurs with the cicadas. Richter watches with the baffled expression of a man who spent a decade learning the physics of fear and now must learn a new grammar of ordinary. Propaganda, he says softly, a word that used to be a blade. Die ganzen Film alles Lüge, all lies. Maybe not all, Carl answers, surprising himself. He thinks of the bent men at the edges of their unit in Tunisia, political officers with sharp eyes and soft hands. He thinks of the sergeant returning a photograph in the desert, and of a farm wife who put down sugar cookies like a peace treaty no one had to sign. He looks at the chalk lines, the bat laid to rest like a tool, the guards chatting with prisoners about batting stance and a bent wrist. But enough. At lights out, the barracks sigh into darkness. Someone at the far end hums Lily Marlene under his breath. Someone nearer answers with Moonlight Serenade. The two melodies overlap and refuse to fight. Carl lies awake and listens to the night settle. Tomorrow there will be work again. Maybe at the sawmill, cutting pulpwood that smells like weddings and coffins. Maybe back to the fields, sun pooled at the collarbone. There will be English verbs, and ice cream if the chalkboard says so, and baseball at 1,600 if the rain holds. He closes his eyes on a country that feels like a contradiction wearing a human face. The 12th of March, 1944, Camp Algona, Iowa. Wind knifes across the parade ground, bending the flag out straight as a saber. Snow lingers in the lee of the barracks, dingy islands where boot prints freeze into fossils. After roll call, the day divides into its dependable parts. Work crews to the sawmill, farm details to the co-ops, a handful of clerks to the administration hut where a black Underwood typewriter rings a little bell at the end of every line. The routine is military in its timing, but what sits inside the hours is something else. A softening, a gradual rearrangement of belief. Obergefreiter Karl Voss tugs his cap down and shoulders into the library just as the pot-bellied stove gives a sigh and settles. A hand-lettered poster is taped to the door. English conversation, today's theme, civic life. Inside, a dozen PWs sit at plank tables. Captain Howard, the camp chaplain, has traded his service cap for wire spectacles and a stack of mimeograph sheets. We'll talk about newspapers, elections, and baseball standings, he says, grinning at the last. Vocabulary first, then a dialogue. They repeat after him. City council, ballot, umpire, strike zone. The words feel like tools. Some fit in the hand at once. Others require the skin to learn their shape. When Carl pairs with a lanky guard named Potter for the dialogue, the first exchange is wooden. The second is looser. By the third, they're arguing in English about whether a newspaper should print letters critical of the mayor. Potter shrugs, easy as a man shifting a rifle sling. Sure, he says. You print it, then you argue it. That's the job. The answer is so matter-of-fact it stuns. Mail arrives in a dump truck that afternoon, a canvas sack after long weeks of nothing. An MP slits the cord with a jackknife, and letters tumble like pale leaves onto the table. A Red Cross clerk in a gray suit and the air of an accountant matches envelopes to names, his pencil racing. Voss, Carl. The letter is thin, careful, the ink gone soft around the strokes where a pen lingered. It is from his mother, posted from a district office now stamped American Sector, the handwriting brave and tidy. She writes of a window mended with cardboard, of potatoes planted in a strip behind the house, of a radio confiscated, and a Bible not. It is a small world, and it is entire. He reads the last line twice. Bleib anständig. Remain decent. At 1,600, the diamond is still crusted with old snow around the bases, but the sun has teeth again. Ramirez slaps a ball into his glove and tosses it to Carl with a soft arc that says, trust without the trouble of the word. Fielding drill, he calls. Two hands on the hop, eyes in the pocket. Their breath smokes as they run patterns. Laughter frays the edges of commands. When Diaz, the camp cook's assistant, shows up with a galvanized bucket, he lifts the lid with the flourish of a stage magician. A mist of cold licks the air. Inside, the stubborn miracle. Wednesday, he announces. Vanilla. In the mess that night, a rumor threads the tables. A re-education team is coming books, films, lectures. Some men scoff, some lean forward. Richter, who once measured his world in firing arcs and fuel barrels, reads the posted notice with a careful mouth. Voluntary, he says, tapping the word as if testing glass. Not political, classes in English, economics, history, discussion of current affairs. The paper even lists a camp newspaper printed by prisoners under supervision. For debate, it promises. Not instruction. He lifts his eyes to Carl. Do you believe them? Carl thinks of the chaplain's easy patience and Potter's shrug about letters to the editor. He thinks of the farm wife with her sugar cookies and the way she had not flinched. I don't know, he answers, and realizes the truth inside the words, that not knowing is a livable place, even a decent one, if questions can be asked out loud. The lecture team arrives in a truck with a hand-cranked projector and crates of paperbacks, a traveling library that smells of ink and glue, a civilian with inked fingers, Mr. Weber, from a college in Minnesota, sets up in the chapel where folding chairs click open like insects. He begins with Tocqueville, then detours to the First Amendment and the daily indignities of a city council meeting, which he relates with such comic exasperation that even the most suspicious men grin. He screens a newsreel in which a city baseball diamond doubles as a polling place. Voters step around chalked baselines with coffee and paper cups, pencil their choices, then linger to watch a Sandlot shortstop snap a throw across his body. It looks both improvised and rule-bound play with the spine. Questions? Weber asks. A hand goes up, a corporal from Bremen who once kept a ledger of rations down to the last ounce. What if a newspaper lies? He demands in German. Weber answers in the same language, not fluently, but with good bones. Then another paper calls them on it, he says. Then you argue. Maybe you vote them out. Probably, he adds with a grimace. You argue some more. Laughter. Genuine. Not everything is sunlight. The camp commandant and his sergeants begin to segregate the hardliners, men whose talk is a constant hiss at the edges of rooms, whose eyes measure not ideas, but loyalties. The move is gentle, almost bureaucratic reassignments here. A new work detail there, but everyone understands its heat. No politics in barracks, the posted order says, which is itself a politics. A week later, an inspection party finds a crude swastika scratched into the underside of a table, and the table is quietly replaced. When the chaplain reads a psalm on Sunday, he chooses one with the word mercy in it so often it stops being soft and starts being a command. Spring sharpens into summer, and America changes color. Corn goes to shoulder, then to eye. Newspapers at the PX thicken with advertisements and casualty lists. On the radio, names of islands and towns they have only studied on maps. Saipan, Streetlow, Aachen. The guards listen with faces carved in two expressions at once, duty and longing. One afternoon, Potter comes to the diamond with his sleeve pinned where an arm used to fill it. A training accident, someone says. A grenade that did not read the same manual as the private who held it. He shags fly balls left-handed and refuses pity. When Ramirez asks if he wants ice cream, Potter answers, I'll take seconds, and grins as if the word itself is a kind of therapy. Something in Carl begins to tilt toward the future. He does not know its shape, he only knows this, that a man can learn a new game, a new grammar, a new way to argue, and remain decent. He tucks the letter from his mother under his pillow, folds the edges to keep it from fraying, and sleeps with the taste of vanilla ghosting his tongue. The 23rd of December 1944, Papago Park, near Phoenix, Arizona. The desert at night is a study in silence. Floodlights wash the wire in a steady white, and the saguaros stand like centuries older than any army. In the barracks, a radio whispers Bing Crosby into darkness. The notes carry across the yard like moths. Far beneath one hut, a tunnel mouths toward freedom, its ribs cribbed with scavenged lumber, its air sour with sweat and ambition. Word of escapes rise the rails from camp to camp. Carl hears it secondhand weeks later in the library at Algona, from a guard who can't stop retelling the engineering. Soup cans hammered into shovels, a submarine built from a wooden duck boat and oars, German sailors pushing across a canal under a moon like a lamp. Most were caught within days, sunburned and hungry, one surrendering politely at the counter of a filling station because he was out of coins for a bottle of soda. They tunneled for months, the guard says, shaking his head with a respect that is not approval, to taste a different sky. The story is theater, but the tension it measures is real. Not all camps are gentle, not all prisoners adjustable. In an Oklahoma barracks the year before, a man suspected of informing has been beaten to death by his own. Guards found him too late. Investigators came with notebooks and tight mouths. The perpetrators were tried in a federal court and hanged, the rope and ending no one in any uniform wanted. The camp at Algona receives the news in a silence that scrapes. The chaplain speaks his hardest sermon. What we tolerate, we teach, he says, hands planted on the lectern. What we refuse, we unlearn. Here, the answer to pressure is separation. The commandant moves the loudest men, the ones whose eyes glitter at night, into a disciplinary compound ringed with an extra wire. Inside, the library shelves thin. Lectures become arguments without nouns. In the main camp, the weather of days holds. Labor, ice cream, baseball, letters. The dual realities live side by side like light and shadow cast by the same sun. Winter in Iowa writes its orders on every surface. The wind lays into the gaps of the barracks wall until the boards hum. Work detaches from fields and follows the timber trucks into the woods. Saw blades scream and steam lifts off horses' backs like a departing soul. In the mess hall, Diaz ladles out something he calls chili, which is mostly beans and comfort. He has decked the serving line with a string of paper stars cut from old PX boxes. Feliz Navidad, he tells the prisoners. Then, in his patient German, Frohe Weihnachten. Men line up to mail packages of camp-made toys to towns nearby. Nativity figures whittled from pine knots, doll cradles hammered straight, a wooden baseball bat carved from ash for a boy whose father is away. On a Sunday, the camp stages a concert. A violin borrowed from a farmer sings songs that cross borders easily, Brahms slow enough to quiet the stove's tick, then Home on the Range, with a wobble that charms rather than mars. After, a guard reads from a newspaper, Ardennes counteroffensive. He stumbles on the name of a Belgian town, pronounces it Maldi. A prisoner corrects him softly, Malmday, as if the syllables were a thing to be kept honest. For a moment, a battlefield fits inside a single vowel. Baseball hibernates poorly. The diamond sleeps under ice. The bats stand in the equipment locker like wintering animals. Guards scrounge a softer ball and move the game into the rec hall, reinventing it with chalked bases on a plank floor and rules rewritten by common sense. They call it pepper and sockball, mashups that make a game out of a long season. Carl learns to take a half swing, to deaden a ball onto a chalk square without splinters. He learns to joke in English, to protest balls and strikes with exactly the right ritual outrage, part drama, part respect for rules that can be argued without breaking. One evening in January, the projector rattles to life and throws a film at the cinder block wall. It's not a newsreel about grand strategy. It's a short about a factory shift change in Illinois, women in hairnets punching out, men in greasy caps punching in, a foreman with a pencil behind his ear, a clock that rules all wrists. The narrator is gentle and brisk. Civics, Captain Howard murmurs, leaning over Carl's shoulder. It isn't theory. It's appointments and arguments and standing in line without shoving. On screen, a worker drops a nickel into a vending machine and gets unbelievably in wartime a paper cup of ice cream. The audience groans and laughs at the same time. The Americans, Richter mutters, half appalled, half delighted. They make a system out of everything. Then, a letter arrives that is not tidy. It comes in February in a gray envelope with a long reach of official English at the top. War Department. The letter says a cousin is missing near the Vistula. It says a friend from school is unaccounted for. It says the town hall is a husk, the church roof a hole traced by weather. The paper shakes in Carl's hand. This too is America. The permission to cry in a quiet corner while a guard stares hard at his boots and pretends not to see. The fault lines don't break the camp apart. They reveal its grain. Under pressure, a thing shows how it was made. Here, The joinery holds rules, inspections, the plodding care of men who carry clipboards, the stubborn regularity of ice cream on Wednesdays, the democratic absurdity of arguing the infield fly rule when half the men don't know the town where their family now sleeps. That combination, enforcement and indulgence, procedure and play, becomes a lesson no lecture can sharpen. When the thaw comes, the baseballs turn from rocks back into leather. The diamond drinks snow until its chalk lines return to ghostly memory. On the day they recut them with a sack of lime, Ramirez pairs Americans and Germans by position rather than passport. Team is team, he says, as if it's an axiom that needs no proof. Out in left field, glove up, eyes squinting into a pale sun, Carl waits on a pop fly. He hears a truck on the road bring news that the war is tipping, that somewhere a river crossing has turned the map. He shades his eyes and watches the ball drop into the pocket of his glove, a perfect padded thump. Some catches are hard. Some, if you get under them, are simple. The 2nd of October, 1945, Camp Algona, Iowa. Victory banners in town have already gone to sepia, the paper cheap enough to fold and keep in drawers. The camp flag flutters at half a height that looks interim, as if it, too, is waiting for orders. On the notice board outside the mess, typed sheets under thumbtacks spell out the new grammar, repatriation lists, embarkation dates, temporary transfer for labor to allied nations. The word is an edict and a tangle. Many men will not go straight home. They will be lent to fields in Britain and France, to mend fences and plow under a harvest, before sea voyages and border queues and the long administrative trail back to a neighborhood that has learned to recognize itself in the mirror again. Carl reads the list 3 times before he finds his name. Voss, Carl transfer via New York, onward assignment, Hampshire, United Kingdom. Richter's finger tracks down another column. Me to Le Havre first, he says. Then maybe. Who knows? Their voices have a trick of sounding casual, only when a hand grips something hard. Table edge. Pocketed fist. For days, the camp is a room being packed. Men giving away a shirt that fit oddly, a book whose binding they repaired, a deck of cards softened by oil and argument. Ramirez leans on the PX counter and watches the traffic with a look he's never practiced before. When Carl asks what it is, Ramirez shrugs. Proud, I guess, and tired. He flicks his eyes toward the chalkboard. One last time. The diamond bears its lines with autumn fierceness. The outfield grass, cut close, smells like cold. A small crowd gathers guards off duty. A knot of townspeople who have been buying their apples and eggs from men behind wire for 2 seasons now. The chaplain keeps score with a pencil, never quite getting the math to balance, but refusing to let it ruin the day. Potter, wearing a glove modified with a leather loop so he can cinch it with one hand, trots to first base and tips his cap. Diaz, promoted to quartermaster of morale, produces the bucket with a flourish. The ice cream inside is half melted, half frozen, an American compromise. Let's play 9, Ramirez calls, and the game begins with a brass bark from someone's borrowed trumpet, the notes dented and joyous. Carl digs in. The first pitch rides high. He blinks. It pops the mitt. The second is true. He swings smooth, remembers to keep his head down, feels the perfect shock that means the ball is a long argument settled. It splits right center and rolls to the fence. He doesn't fly. He runs with the economy of a man who has learned to make long loops into straight lines. At third, Potter windmills his arm like a railroad crossing. Carl slides and carves a furrow at the plate. Safe. The crowd claps with palms bare of rank. Between innings, a boy from town taps the wire with a question that takes the whole summer to form. Mr., he says to Carl in a thin, valiant English, how do you say home run in German? Carl opens a mouth that could explain exile and return, guilt and luck, the geography of a future that forks. He considers the literal Heimlauf, which is both ridiculous and exactly right. He laughs, gentle. Home run, he says. Some words you borrow. A Red Cross car arrives mid-game with a clipboard and the last set of stamps. Men queue, sign names into a system that will usher them onto trains, then ships, then trains again. The Swiss delegate tips his hat like a ritual. The commandant shakes hands as if all their interactions have been part of one long negotiation conducted in good faith. When the ninth ends in a tie, the only honorable conclusion, the crowd drifts toward the PX, where a chalkboard says vanilla and chocolate to script today. Diaz doles it out double. Victory scoop, he calls it. For everybody. A small justice, a large gesture. Carl eats slowly this time, refuses to swallow too much sweetness without tasting it. That night the barracks echoes with the dumb gravity of packing. Footlockers gasp their hinges. Photographs are slid into envelopes with the caution given to relics. The Underwood in the admin hut hammers out transit lists and a final camp newspaper. In it, under a headline set slightly crooked, an editorial in German thanks the town for work and decency, the guards for rules kept and kindness not forbidden by them, the Red Cross for the tyranny of paperwork that somehow becomes mercy. At the bottom, between a cartoon of a bat and a dish of ice cream, a line reads, "We learned a game. It will help." The 9th of October, 1945. New York Harbor. The Liberty ship's deck smells like rope and steam. The skyline cuts its sawtooth profile against a sky that can't decide whether to be winter yet. On the pier, a band plays again, smaller, piping, as if to see them off the way they were once brought in. Men lean at the rail and try to collect the shape of the country in their eyes. The high stacks, the impatient tugs, the moving water that is always leaving and always coming back. Ramirez finds Carl at the starboard rail, taps a cigarette loose, offers it. No smoking after lights out. He deadpans, and they both grin at the line's long journey from warning to joke. "Thank you," Carl says, in English that has lost its stiffness. He means for the ice cream. He means for the labor assignments that paid in paper, but also in dignity. For the library where books carried arguments that did not require fists. For a game with a rule book thick enough to be fair and elastic enough to let joy in. He means for a photograph that was handed back in a desert with a nod that acknowledged a man before his uniform. Ramirez nods, the brim of his helmet bumping his brow. "Go home," he says. "Be decent." The ship eases away, ropes slap water and come to rest in neat snakes on the pier. A gull hangs in the updraft like a thought refusing conclusion. The harbor narrows to a funnel. The sea opens like a page. Around Carl, men begin to speak in futures. Some will labor in English fields, learn hedgerows and weather, and tea at 4. Some will arrive in French towns that smell of yeast and brick dust, their hands mending roofs, while their hearts touch maps of places a continent away. In time, some will return to Germany and find streets wearing new names. A few will make their way back across this ocean as immigrants, chasing the rumor of a factory job in Milwaukee, a cousin in Street, Paul, a farm in Kansas where the rows are straight enough to quiet the mind. He holds the rail and catalogs what is in his pockets, a stub of pencil, a camp script note the PX wouldn't redeem, kept for memory, not money, a folded vocabulary list with coffee smears, a baseball card of some center fielder grinning like a man with both hands in the future. He has not earned absolution. He has earned a chance to choose. The wind lifts, the ship tilts, the skyline steps backward. On the horizon, a new weather is writing itself. The rules will be different. He knows now that he can learn them.